Okay, so recently, while I was on Twix, what I like to call Twitter and X, Twix, I'm really trying to make that a thing, so help me out here. Let's start calling it that. Anyway, I was on Twix the other day, and just over in the what's happening, what's trending, Starship Troopers was in that side page, and I'm like, okay, is there like a new movie coming out? No, apparently everyone recently has decided to be having this massive debate on whether Starship Troopers is a movie that promotes fascism or if it's actually a political satire that critiques fascism. And like, I'm seeing all these people on X, Twix, Twitter, I'm just going to say Twix. I'm seeing all these people on Twix going like, oh, it just glorifies fascism. And other people's like, no, you fucking moron. It's a political satire on fascism. And you're not seeing it, and people trying to explain the brilliance of the film while other people are just saying that it's a terrible film, we shouldn't be watching it. And it's just like, what started this? But seeing all of this back and forth got me starting to think like about the movie, about is it actually glorifying fascism? I personally think if you were to make the argument that it was glorifying a sort of political economic system, I would make the argument that it's actually glorifying socialism or a militaristic socialism over fascism. And you may go, whoa, what are you talking about? Well, I'm not going to get into a whole political discussion here. I will say, however, go Google the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. You'll be a little surprised at what you find. But getting off of politics and getting back into this movie, after hearing everyone criticize this film, I was thinking, okay, like, is this a bad movie? I personally don't think so. And so I started thinking about, well, am I wrong? Could they be wrong? And I was just starting to like re-examine this movie, and I figured, when is a better time to talk about Starship Troopers? And so yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so starting off, straight up, this is probably one of my two top favorite Paul Verhoeven films he's ever made. The other one, obviously, is RoboCop. Some of you may be going, wait a minute, what about Total Recall? That was another amazing film. I will give you that Total Recall is a fun, entertaining Arnold Schwarzenegger action flick. But personally for me, the top two are RoboCop and Starship Troopers. And you may be asking, well, obviously RoboCop is the top one, right? There are days I gotta give it to Starship Troopers over RoboCop. There are other days that it's like, nah, I gotta give it to RoboCop over Starship Troopers. And you may be thinking, okay, why do you think Starship Troopers is one of his better films? Well, obviously, growing up as a kid, I saw this at a very young age, and to me, it was just a fun, awesome, dumb action movie. And as like a 10, 11-year-old kid, seeing this for the first time, it's like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And well, like, it really surprised me. I was not expecting this movie to be as graphic as it was when I saw it the first time at the age of 10. And so that was another thing. It's like, wow, this is a very visually graphic film. And like, it's one of the coolest science fictions ever. And then it wasn't until years later that I heard people saying, that was a satire, right? On, militarism and political, militaristic fascism and whatnot. It's like, huh. And so going back into the movie, watching again, I do have to agree with some of the Twitter bros that are saying it's not a glorifying movie, it's actually a political satire, I do have to lean into their camp that, yeah, this is a political satire. Because there is some very obvious scenes in this movie that are poking fun at the satire of what it would be like if the world was ruled by a militaristic, fascist, socialist state. And there are also some other really, really, really subtle, really, really clever pokes of political satire at this movie, especially towards the end. Like, I've seen this movie over a dozen times easily in my life, and it wasn't until like last week that someone was pointing out something specifically about the end, like the last minute before the credits roll, and it's just like, oh wow, I never noticed that before. That's actually really good. And that's from someone who's, I don't think I'm an idiot, and I've watched this movie a dozen times and I didn't even catch that. So there are these moments of like very, very cleverly hidden jabs of satire at what if the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany ruled the world 100 years in the future. And so it's one of those films that just seems like a generic dumb film when you first see it, and then on subsequent viewing you kind of start seeing the nuance and starting to see kind of the messaging in the subtext of the film. Another movie like this is District 9. First couple of times I watched District 9, I just thought it was an awesome sci-fi alien action flick. And then on subsequent viewings, it's like, you know, that's actually an allegory for apartheid in South Africa. It's like, it is actually. And I miss movies like these, where you go in initially, and if you're just looking to turn your brain off, you can turn your brain off, and then years later down the road, when you find out, you know, that actually was an allegory for slavery, it's like, oh, I should watch that again and try like see it from that angle. And I think people tend to really appreciate those types of movies a lot more than the ones that just bash an allegory hammer right in your face. Sorry for being over dramatic on that, but the last like couple of years, it has been that fucking blatant, and it boils my blood when movies are just straight up in your face. You're not allowed to escape. You have to take our political opinion right in your face. And they don't do movies like this or like District 9 anymore. They're just blatant about it. And I wish we'd go back to that, where it's like, hey, I'm going to do a fun, you know, action thriller, and, you know, we're going to have kind of like a subtext of like, you know, this is kind of about the evils of, you know, oil. And, you know, but we're going to make it really subtle. And we're going to have some things in there so subtle that you're not going to notice it until like your 5th or 6th viewing, if you're smart. And we don't really get that anymore. But going back to this film, getting away from the like theologian aspect of examining this film, why do I like it? Because I watched it numerous times before seeing it as a political satire. I'm not one of the people that only watches this as a political satire. This is a movie that you can have your brain on during, but it's also a movie you can turn your brain off during. And first 6 times I watched this movie, my brain was off the entire time, just enjoying the ride. And like, one of the things I really like about this movie that not a lot of people really give credit to is they really do some interesting, fascinating, like, what if changes to this like future Earth that this movie is set in. It does a lot of really great world building for stuff that's not crucial to the main plot. Like, case in point, the capital of Earth is Buenos Aires, Buenos Aires in South America. And this movie doesn't like initially take place at New York or LA or, you know, London. It takes place in Buenos Aires. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but, you know, English is my first language, so you can forgive me. So, like, but other things, like, basically, psychics are a thing. And it's just like, are you psychic? You know, take the test to find out. And it's not this huge thing that, you know, is the focal point of the Earth. You know, you have mixed sex, you know, sporting events. There's not any more like, you know, boys football and women's football. It's just all together. And then you have like, you know, football games on hard court arenas. It's just like little tiny things that they do that just I find really fascinating. It's types of like little world building like that I find really interesting. And not a lot of science fictions go the extra mile to build their worlds out like this one did. And so I think that was one of the initial drawing points to me that I really liked about this film. There's these little kernels all over the place of things that aren't really crucial to the story, but just kind of help paint the picture a little bit better to draw you into this. Is it a dumb action movie? Is it political satire? We don't know. The people on Twix, I know, yeah. Another thing I absolutely love is the music. The music was done by, and again, English is my first language, so I'm going to slaughter his name, but Basil Polidoris, which I think is the best way you can pronounce it if English is your first language. He is probably one of my top 3 favorite musical composers of all time. The guy did the score for RoboCop. The guy did the score for Conan the Barbarian. He also did the score for Conan the Destroyer. Not as good as the first film, but I'm glad they kept the musical score. He did the score for Starship Troopers, and there's a couple of other movies where it's like, oh yeah, no, this is a banger because this guy can compose music. He's like, if you love Hans Zimmer, you should give this guy a listen because he has masterful musical scores. And the musical score for Starship Troopers is outstanding. There's like this one song, Raid on Clondathu, that's in this film. You're going to be humming that song for like the next week after seeing this film. It is that catchy for a musical piece. But it's not just the music that I fell in love with this movie. The CGI, sure, you can poke at some aspects of the CGI, but all things considered, for a 1990s film, the CGI has aged very nicely. And so there's movies from the 90s that tried to implement CGI, and it's like, it did not age well whatsoever. This movie's one of the exceptions from the 90s where, yeah, you could probably poke at certain aspects of the visual effects, especially the computer-generated graphics, but damn did they age well. And so, it's not the best, but compared to other films in the series, which I would recommend you don't watch any other movie in the series, just watch this one. But compared to the other ones, like, this one has the best CGI visual effects, practical effects. There's some really awesome practical effects in this film as well. Let's talk about the sequels real quick. The second one literally was not trying to do anything interesting. It was just capitalizing on the name. And it's like, hey, what if we were to do something like John Carpenter's The Thing and Alien and make it more of a horror story than anything else? And then the third one, which brought a lot, at least the main character, back, it started off okay, but just descended into like, what? And it was trying to do like the satire thing as well, but it wasn't as effective as with this movie. And then there were like 2 animated films. I didn't watch one, I watched the other one, and it's like, at least they have the theme back, you know. But like, honestly, this is kind of like the only one worth watching, really. Unless you're really into animated films, then you can check those out. The other 2 live action ones, I wouldn't really give it much merit. And supposedly they're remaking this with 2 caveats. One, it's not going to be as graphic. Boo. And then the other one is it's going to follow the book more closely. And apparently in the book they had like power suits and there was like a lot more characters. And I kind of find that books get better adapted as TV shows than movies. So maybe they should consider just doing a TV series. But TV series don't look as sharp as a film. Yeah, we're almost there. But going back to this movie, another thing I really liked as a kid was the action sequences, and they still hold up. I mean, the raid on the compound on that desert planet is still one of the highlights of the film. It's a very entertaining sequence. The ship getting hit and the evacuation scene, very entertaining. The kind of last stand with that one character, really awesome. I mean, there's some pretty awesome action moments in this film. Another thing that's great about this film, there were some really memorable lines and there's some really memorable characters. I mean, you have like Clancy Brown as a drill instructor is like one of the coolest drill instructors ever. He's an ass, but one of the coolest. And then you have Jake Busey, like his character was freaking awesome. And then of course you have Diz, she was a very likable character. Johnny Rico, you have a lot of these really awesome characters. And of course, like my favorite in the entire movie, Michael Ironside. Like, this is easily one of my favorite roles he has done. And I have played the Splinter Cell games, and I would say I like his role in this movie better than him as Sam Fisher. And Sam Fisher is easily one of his biggest characters. And just, he's freaking awesome in this movie. I wish he was in the movie more. But so, like, all things considered, I think it's funny that Starship Troopers has popped up on Twix in the past couple of weeks. If you haven't seen this movie, I would recommend try going in, watching it as a dumb action movie first, and then start looking up like all of the political satire people have been pointing out. You might see it the first time, and I think you might appreciate the film a little bit more when you've seen it as a dumb movie, and then continue on. It's like, oh, actually, this is a lot more intelligent than it's leading on to be. And I actually think that's a strength of this movie. I like that a kid can come into this movie and watch it and just see it as an action film, and then a college study can come in, watch it, and go, wow, that was actually quite a political satire right there. Some people have been arguing it's not a political satire, but you know what? I'm going to go on a limb and say I think it is. And so, I mean, I would recommend you check out Starship Troopers. This isn't exactly, I don't think you've seen this film. It's a very big, well-known movie, but it's in kind of the public space in the past couple of weeks. And so I decided just to throw my thoughts on the film itself and kind of throw my 2 cents into it. And so, yeah, that's been my views on Starship Troopers. What do you guys think of the film? Do you agree with me on anything? Do you disagree? Say off in the comments down below. My name is Chris O'Connell with 11th Hour Reviews, and that will be all for today.